Welcome back to Mr. Dreadmere. Tonight, I have 10 true terrifying night drive through heavy rain horror stories. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, because once you step onto the Mr. Dreadmere, you don't walk alone. I was gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make my hands ache when I first heard it. A soft pull of air behind me, slow and measured, like someone breathing through their nose. I glanced at the road, then the mirror, then the road again, telling myself it was nothing, just the heater shifting or my own breath echoing in the cab. I had just finished my shift at the harbour, muscles heavy, head dull, and all I wanted was my bed. The sound came again, closer this time, not loud, just present, steady, patient. I felt my shoulders tighten as I listened, counting without meaning to. In, out. In, out. It wasn't matching my breathing. That realization hit me harder than the sound itself. I held my breath, and the breathing behind me continued, calm and unbothered. I told myself it had to be the rain, the pressure, something trapped in the car. I had driven this route 100 times, always alone, always tired. I flicked my eyes to the rearview mirror again. For a second, I saw nothing but darkness and streaked glass. Then a flash of lightning lit the road, and the mirror bloomed white with fog. A soft oval right where a face would be, condensation spreading as if warm air had just touched it. My heart jumped so hard I felt it in my throat. I swore out loud, a sharp word that sounded thin in the car. The fog faded quickly, leaving the mirror clear again. I laughed once, too loud, forcing it out. "You're losing it," I said to myself, my voice shaking. "Just tired." I reached back with one hand, fumbling behind the seat, touching nothing but damp fabric and the cold metal of the seat frame. The breathing didn't stop. It didn't change. It just stayed there, like it had always been there and I was only just noticing. I tried the radio, twisting the knob until static filled the car. The noise helped at first. It gave my mind something to grab onto. But even through the hiss, I could still hear it, that quiet rise and fall. Closer to my right ear now, as if whoever it belonged to had leaned forward. Another flash of lightning. The mirror fogged again, faster this time. The shape more defined. I didn't let myself look too long. I stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes burning. My thoughts started racing, trying to build a sensible explanation. Someone hiding in the car. A prank. Exhaust fumes doing something to my head. Each idea fell apart as soon as it formed. I spoke again louder. "If someone's there, say something." My words hung in the air. The breathing paused for half a second, just long enough to make my skin prickle, then resumed, slower now, deeper, as if it had heard me and was considering its answer. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The car shuddered slightly, tires gripping wet asphalt, and I focused on the feel of it, the vibration through the wheel, the hum of the engine. I needed something solid, something real. The breathing matched the speed of the car now, quickening as I did, as if we were connected. My turnoff was coming up, a narrow road that cut away from the main stretch. I debated missing it, just driving until morning, until there were lights and people. But the thought of being trapped in the car longer than necessary made my chest tighten. I turned. The road dipped, and lightning cracked again, close enough to make my ears ring. The mirror fogged completely this time, a full sheet of white, and in the center of it, a single clear patch formed, like a mouth pressed to glass. I felt a wave of cold roll through me, starting at the base of my neck and spreading down my back. "I know you," a voice whispered, so close it brushed my ear. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was familiar in a way I couldn't place, like hearing an old recording of yourself. I jerked the wheel, nearly losing control, tires skidding before I corrected. "What do you want?" I shouted, panic finally breaking through. My throat burned, eyes stinging. The car smelled suddenly of damp wool and something older, metallic. The breathing stopped. The silence was worse. I pulled over without thinking, slamming the brakes, the car rocking to a halt. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them to make them still. I counted my breaths, forcing air into my lungs. Another lightning flash lit the interior. In the mirror, I saw him clearly for the first time. He was me, or close enough to make no difference, wearing the same coat, the same exhausted expression. Eyes hollowed by something heavy. His mouth was open, fogging the glass with each breath. "I stayed," he said, his lips moving out of sync with the words. "You left." Understanding hit me like a blow. The accident years ago, the night the ferry lines snapped and a man went into the water. The way I had driven home afterward, shaking, telling no one what I had seen, what I could have done. I had carried it with me, buried deep, convincing myself it was over. The figure in the mirror smiled sadly. "You carried me," he said. "Every night. I closed my eyes," tears spilling before I could stop them. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The words felt small, but they were all I had. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was clear. The air felt lighter. The car was quiet, just the engine ticking as it cooled. I sat there for a long time before driving home, finishing the trip alone finally. I slowed the truck the moment I saw him, a small figure standing at the edge of the road, head down, clothes plastered to his body. I remember thinking it was too late, too quiet, for a child to be out there alone. My hands moved before my thoughts caught up, easing the vehicle to a stop. I leaned across the seat and cracked the window, rain blowing in. "Hey," I called, trying to sound calm. "Are you lost?" He looked up slowly. He was younger than I first thought, maybe 6 or 7, hair dark and dripping into his eyes. He didn't answer. He just stood there, water running off his sleeves and pooling around his shoes. Something in his stillness made my stomach tighten. Most kids would cry, or wave, or run. He just waited. I opened the door and stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the soft shoulder. "Where's your mum or dad?" I asked. He shook his head once. The movement was small, careful, like he didn't want to break something. I glanced down the road in both directions. Nothing. No lights. No houses close enough to explain him being there. I told myself the right thing was to help. Leaving him wasn't an option. "All right," I said, forcing a gentle tone. "You can sit in the truck. We'll get you somewhere safe." He hesitated, then climbed in without touching me, perching on the passenger seat, hands folded in his lap. Water soaked into the fabric instantly. As I drove, I kept stealing glances at him. He didn't look around, didn't fidget. His gaze stayed fixed on the dashboard. "What's your name?" I asked. After a pause, he said, "I don't have one." His voice was flat, not upset, just matter of fact. I laughed nervously, assuming I misheard. "Everyone's got a name," I said. He didn't respond. The farmhouse was still a good stretch away, and my mind started filling with questions. Had he wandered off? Had something happened nearby? I told myself I'd drop off the supplies and then take him straight to the police station. That plan steadied me a bit. I turned the heater up, hoping to warm him. He didn't seem to notice. When we reached the farmhouse, the owners met me at the door. I explained quickly, gesturing to the truck. "I found him on the road," I said. "Do you recognize him?" They leaned out, peering into the cab. The woman frowned. "There's no one there," she said. I felt a chill run through me. "He's right there," I insisted, heart pounding. She shook her head slowly. I spun around. The seat was empty, soaked, water still dripping onto the floor. My breath caught. The couple watched me carefully now, concern replacing confusion. I stammered something about stress, about thinking I saw someone. They helped unload the supplies while I tried to steady myself, my thoughts racing. I didn't stay long. I drove straight to the police station, hands trembling on the wheel. Inside, I told them everything, every detail. The officer listened, typing, then frowned at his screen. He made a call, checked another record. Finally, he looked up. "There's no report," he said. "No missing child. Not recently. Not ever, matching that description." I felt dizzy. "Maybe he's not from around here," I said weakly. The officer shook his head. "We checked neighboring areas too," he replied. "Nothing." He asked me to describe the boy again. As I spoke, I realized something unsettling. I couldn't remember his face clearly anymore. Just the wet hair, the stillness. They let me go after a while, suggesting rest. I drove home in silence, every shadow on the road making me tense. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty seat, water pooling where he had been. The next day, I went back to the station, hoping for some update. The same officer met me, sympathy in his eyes. "There's something else," he said. He pulled out an old folder. Inside were yellowed reports, decades old, about a child struck on that same road. No family ever came forward. No name was recorded. I felt my chest tighten. "What happened to him?" I asked. The officer hesitated. "He was found alone," he said, cold. "No one knows where he came from." I nodded slowly, understanding settling in, heavy and sad. I drove that road once more after that, in daylight. I stopped where I'd first seen him. The ground was dry now, ordinary. I stood there for a long time, then whispered goodbye, hoping somehow he could hear me. I haven't seen him again, but I never drive past a child in need now. Some stories don't get reported, but they still need someone to stop. The wipers stopped mid, sweep without warning, freezing upright as if someone had grabbed them, and a second later the headlights cut out too, plunging me into moving darkness. I swore and lifted my foot, heart slamming, gripping the wheel as rain smeared across the windshield faster than I could process. The engine was still running, the dashboard glowing, but everything ahead of me vanished. I eased the van forward by instinct, then braked hard, breath coming fast, telling myself to stay calm, stay logical. I reached for the controls, flicking the wipers off and on again, then the lights. Nothing. Just black ahead and the hiss of water hitting metal. I sat there, frozen, listening to my own breathing and the soft rattle of medical cases in the back. I was on an overnight delivery run, ventilator parts that couldn't wait until morning. Turning back wasn't an option, not with the clock already tight. I tried the lights again, harder this time, like force might help. When they came back on, they did it all at once, a sudden wash of white that made me flinch. The wipers lurched into motion too, sweeping away the blur. I exhaled shakily, relief rushing through me, until my eyes adjusted and I realized something was wrong. The road wasn't the road anymore. I knew these back routes well enough to drive them half asleep. This stretch should have been straight for another few minutes before bending left. Instead, the asphalt ahead dipped sharply and curved right, narrowing into something I didn't recognize. No sign, no junction, just a different direction entirely. I slowed to a crawl, scanning for markers, fences, anything familiar. My stomach tightened as nothing matched my memory. "You missed a turn," I muttered, though I knew I hadn't. I checked the mirrors, then glanced back at the cases behind me, grounding myself. Real job, real cargo, real road. That thought steadied me enough to keep going. After a short distance, the lights flickered again, not fully out this time, but enough to make my pulse spike. When they stabilized, the road had shifted again, now climbing steeply. Trees closing in where open fields should have been. I felt a creeping unease, the sense of being nudged off course without noticing how. I pulled over and killed the engine, letting silence settle. Rain ticked against the roof. I took out my phone. No signal. The navigation app spun uselessly, refusing to load the map. I laughed under my breath, sharp and humorless. "Of course," I said to the empty cab. I considered turning around. But when I looked behind me, the road dropped away into darkness, swallowed by rain. No lights, no reflective posts, just black. That scared me more than the wrong turn ahead. I started the engine again, hands slick on the wheel, and drove. Each time the wipers hesitated, my chest tightened. Each time the lights flickered, the road subtly changed, never drastically, just enough to unsettle me. A bend that shouldn't be there. A slope that felt wrong. I started counting seconds between changes, trying to impose order, but there was no pattern I could grasp. Eventually I saw a vehicle ahead, taillights glowing red through the rain. Relief hit me so hard it almost hurt. I followed at a safe distance, grateful for something to anchor myself to. The other driver seemed confident, steady, and I matched their pace, telling myself they knew this road. After a while, the taillights slowed, then stopped. I pulled up behind them, heart thudding, and rolled my window down. "You all right?" I called. No answer. I stepped out, rain soaking me instantly, and walked forward. The car was empty, engine cold, interior dry, as if it hadn't been driven in hours. Panic crawled up my spine. I backed away, slipping slightly, and returned to my van. When I got back inside, the headlights dimmed again. I slammed the wheel in frustration. "Enough," I said, voice cracking. I took a breath, then another, forcing myself to think. If the road was changing when systems failed, then staying stopped was safer. I turned everything off, sitting in darkness, listening. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Slowly, I turned the key, then the lights. They came on cleanly. The wipers moved smoothly. I waited, counting, then drove forward carefully. The road ahead straightened, familiar markers appearing one by one. A sign finally emerged, the name of the delivery point clear and correct. I laughed, shaky but relieved, and kept going until I reached the facility, hands trembling as I unloaded the cases. The staff didn't notice anything odd about me, just thanked me and signed the forms. The drive home was uneventful, every system working perfectly. I took the van to maintenance the next day. They found corrosion in the wiring, enough to cause simultaneous failures. Lucky it didn't happen somewhere worse, the mechanic said. I didn't argue, I just nodded. Knowing some roads only appear when you can't see where you're going, and vanish once you survive them. I had just accepted the request when he opened the rear door and slid into the seat behind me. Water dripping onto the floor mat as if he had been standing in the rain for a long time. I glanced at him in the mirror out of habit, enough to register a dark jacket and his head angled down, then pulled away from the curb. "Evening," I said, keeping my voice light. He didn't respond. That wasn't unusual. Some passengers wanted silence, especially on night routes. We drove for a few minutes with nothing but the sound of tires on wet pavement and the soft tick of the indicator. I checked the app. The destination was vague, just a stretch of road on the outskirts, no house number. I asked, "You heading somewhere specific?" Still nothing. I told myself not to read into it, but my shoulders were tight. Something about his stillness felt deliberate, like he was holding himself in place. At the next light, I glanced back again. His eyes were on me in the mirror, steady and unblinking. I looked away quickly, heat creeping up my neck. I reminded myself I was safe, doors locked, phone charged. I'd driven hundreds of people like this. Quiet didn't mean dangerous. The rain picked up, hammering the roof hard enough that it filled the car with noise. I focused on the road, following the GPS as it led us farther from town. "Just confirming," I said, more for my own comfort than anything. "This drop-off is right." The app pinged, recalculating, then settled back on the same route. He shifted slightly in the seat, the first movement he'd made. I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. We passed a turnoff I recognized, one that led toward the lake. The GPS told me to continue straight. I frowned, slowing a little. "That doesn't seem right," I muttered. From the back seat, He finally spoke. "Keep going, Lissy." My hands clenched around the wheel. No one had called me that in years. It wasn't on my profile. It wasn't something friends used. It was a name from my childhood, from a time before I'd moved away, before I'd cut contact with most of my family. I swallowed hard. "How do you know that name?" I asked, forcing the words out evenly. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. "You don't like it," he said eventually. Not a question, just an observation. His voice was calm, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. I considered pulling over, ending the ride, but the road was narrow and empty, and the thought of stopping alone with him made my stomach twist. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice shook despite my effort to control it. "You used to sit on the steps and wait for me," he said. Images flashed in my mind unbidden, memories I hadn't touched in years. A house that smelled like damp wood. A man who came and went, who knew things he shouldn't. I felt a surge of anger and fear. "You've got the wrong person," I said sharply. "You need to get out." The GPS chimed, announcing the destination ahead. It was a dead-end road, trees pressing close on both sides. I slowed, heart racing, and pulled over as the app instructed. "This is it," I said. "Ride's over." He didn't move. In the mirror, his expression was unreadable. "You never told anyone," he said softly. "You just left." The words hit me like a blow. My chest tightened, breath coming shallow. "Get out!" I repeated louder now. I unlocked the doors with shaking fingers. He leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could smell wet fabric and something older beneath it. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I needed you to remember." I felt tears sting my eyes, anger flaring hot. I remember plenty. I snapped. I survived. That's enough. For a long moment, he just watched me. Then he opened the door. Cold air rushed in, rain spattering the seat. He stepped out, straightened, and looked back at me one last time. "Good," he said. "Then you don't need me anymore." He closed the door gently and walked away into the darkness. I sat there for a full minute, hands trembling, before I drove off. I ended my shift early that night. The next day, I deleted my account and changed my number. I started therapy not long after. I never saw him again. Sometimes, though, when it rains hard, I hear that name in my head, and I remind myself I'm not that child anymore. I kept my foot steady on the accelerator as the rain thickened, the truck humming under me, the boxes of archived documents shifting softly in the back with every curve. The wipers were working hard, but the water came down in sheets so dense that the road ahead began to lose its edges. I leaned forward, squinting, telling myself I'd driven worse stretches than this. These papers had survived decades in storage. I just needed to get them across the pass. The first thing I noticed was how the center line faded, not vanished suddenly, just softened like chalk rubbed by a careless hand. I slowed, feeling the steering lighten slightly. The tires didn't sound the same anymore. The usual hiss against asphalt dulled into something flatter, almost hollow. I eased off the gas, heart beginning to thud, and tried to spot the shoulder. Water was everywhere. Not puddles, not streams, but a moving surface that reflected nothing clearly. I told myself the road was still there, hidden under the flow. I kept going because stopping felt worse. I was afraid if I paused, I wouldn't be able to start again. My hands were sweating, slipping on the wheel, and I wiped them on my jacket without looking away. The truck lurched gently, like a boat settling. That was when the thought finally formed, cold and sharp. I couldn't feel the road. I tested the brake, just a touch. The response was slow, spongy. Panic rose in my chest, squeezing my breath. I pressed harder and the truck drifted, not stopping, just changing direction slightly, as if guided by the water itself. I remember saying, "No, no," out loud, my voice thin and useless. The headlights showed nothing solid, just churning rain and a grey sheen beneath. The sense of forward motion became guesswork. I turned the wheel, felt resistance, but it didn't translate the way it should have. The tires weren't gripping. They were floating. The realization hit fully then. I wasn't driving on a road anymore. I was moving over something that no longer supported me. My mind raced through options. Reverse, brake, get out. None of them made sense. I was already committed. Carried by momentum and water, the truck nudged along a path I couldn't see. There was a sudden drop, slight but unmistakable, and my stomach lurched. I slammed the brake hard. The truck tilted, nose dipping, and then stopped with a jolt that rattled my teeth. Silence followed, broken only by rain hammering the roof. I sat there, frozen, afraid to move, afraid that any shift would send me sliding again. I took a shaky breath and tried the door. It wouldn't open. Water pressed against it from outside, heavy and insistent. I leaned back, heart pounding, and looked through the windshield. The rain thinned just enough for me to see that the ground ahead sloped away sharply. The road had been eaten out from under me, washed down toward the sea. I stayed still, counting my breaths, until the water level dropped enough to ease the pressure. When I finally opened the door, cold air and spray rushed in. I stepped out carefully, boots sinking into soft, unstable ground. The truck sat at an angle, front wheels hanging over empty space, rear barely supported by what remained of the pass. I laughed then, a short, broken sound, because the alternative was screaming. I moved slowly, inch by inch, away from the truck until I reached firmer ground. Only then did my legs start to shake. I crouched there, soaked and exhausted, staring at the gap where the road used to be. Hours later, after help arrived, I watched them secure the truck and recover the documents. Some were damaged, most salvageable. No one was hurt. They called it bad luck, extreme conditions. I nodded and agreed. But I still remember the moment the road disappeared, and how easy it was to keep going when there was nothing left to drive on. I was already halfway home when I saw her standing near the guardrail, small shoulders hunched, rain soaking her coat so thoroughly it looked too heavy for her frame. I slowed without thinking, the babysitting money folded in my pocket, my head still full of bedtime stories and whispered good nights. Rolling down the window, I called out, asking if she was okay, if she needed help. She turned her head slowly toward me, and even in the poor light I could see her eyes were wide, glassy, fixed. I told myself she was scared, cold, maybe lost. That happened sometimes out there. I pulled over and opened the passenger door, gesturing for her to get in. She climbed in without a word, movements careful and precise, water dripping from her hair onto the seat. I asked her name. She didn't answer. I asked where she lived. Nothing. I swallowed my unease and started driving, telling her I'd take her somewhere safe. For the first few minutes, I focused on the road, on keeping the car steady, on the rhythm of driving that usually calmed me. I tried again. "Your parents must be worried," I said gently. No reaction. I glanced at her in the mirror. She was sitting upright, hands folded neatly in her lap, staring straight ahead. Her eyes didn't flicker. I assumed she was in shock. I kept talking, filling the silence with reassurance, with nonsense, anything to keep my own nerves down. As minutes passed, the quiet grew heavier. I checked the mirror again, and something about her gaze made my chest tighten. Children blink. Even scared ones do. She hadn't. I told myself I was imagining it, that I just hadn't noticed before. I counted without meaning to. 10 minutes. 15. Each time I glanced up, her eyes were exactly the same, unblinking, unwatering, fixed on nothing. My mouth went dry. I slowed slightly, heart thudding, and asked if she could blink for me, just to show she was okay. Her lips parted a fraction, but she didn't answer. She didn't blink. A memory surfaced then, uninvited. a story my grandmother used to tell about mountain roads and children who didn't belong to anyone anymore. I pushed it away hard. This was real. I was here. She was here. Fear didn't help anyone. I decided to take her straight to the police station. That was logical. That was safe. As I turned the wheel, she finally moved. Her head tilted toward me just slightly. "You're going the wrong way," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she was stating a fact. I felt a jolt of fear. "How do you know?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just turned her head back forward, eyes still wide open. My hands were shaking now. I felt trapped between stopping and continuing, between leaving her and staying. I kept driving. The road felt longer than it should have, every curve stretching my nerves tighter. I watched her reflection constantly. 20 minutes passed. She still hadn't blinked once. I pulled over suddenly, breathing hard. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you to blink. Just once." Slowly, she turned to look directly at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed now, but dry. "If I blink," she said softly, "I won't be here anymore." Cold washed through me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She held my gaze for a moment longer, then reached for the door handle. "Thank you for stopping," she said. She opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I watched, frozen, as she walked a few steps away and then simply wasn't there. I sat in the car for a long time before driving home, shaking and soaked in fear. The next day, I asked around. No missing child, no reports. An older neighbor told me a girl had died on that road years before, waiting for help that never came. I still drive that way, but I never stop anymore. I blink too much just to remind myself I can. I was already halfway across the moor road when the rain grew so loud it swallowed the sound of the engine. A sudden wall of noise that pressed in on the cab and made my chest feel tight. I glanced at the gauges, at the antique strapped carefully behind me, and eased my foot, wondering if the van had stalled. It hadn't. I could feel the vibration through the seat, but my ears told me otherwise, and that mismatch made my skin crawl. I leaned forward, straining to hear, cracking the window an inch before immediately closing it again when the roar intensified. The rain wasn't just falling, it was hammering, a solid presence that erased everything else. I spoke out loud, saying my own name, just to test reality. I couldn't hear myself. Panic flickered, brief but sharp, and I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting each breath in my head. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. Not faded, not eased, but cut off completely. Silence dropped so hard it felt like pressure popping in my ears. I let out a shaky laugh, relief rushing in, until I realized the silence was wrong. There was no engine sound anymore, no tires on wet stone, nothing. I lifted my foot and tapped the accelerator. The van responded, lurching forward, but the quiet remained unnatural and absolute. My thoughts raced. Had I gone deaf? Was this shock? I checked the mirrors, grounding myself in something visual. That was when I saw the headlights behind me. They were close, closer than anyone should have been on that road, pale and steady, matching my speed exactly. I hadn't seen another vehicle for miles. I swallowed and focused ahead, telling myself someone had come up fast during the storm. The moor road was narrow, unforgiving. Passing would be difficult. I flicked my indicator and slowed slightly, intending to pull over at the next wider stretch. The headlights stayed put, unwavering, not gaining, not falling back. My pulse quickened. I waved a hand out the window, a pointless gesture, then pulled in as far as I dared. The van stopped. The headlights stopped with me. I waited, heart thudding, expecting doors to open and engine to rev. Nothing happened. The silence pressed in again, thick enough to feel. I glanced back. The lights were still there, but there was no outline of a vehicle behind them. Just two perfect circles hanging in the dark. I told myself it was rain distortion. fatigue, anything sensible. I eased back onto the road. The lights followed. Every turn, every slight change in speed, they mirrored me. I felt hunted, though nothing overtly threatened me. That was worse. My mind searched for patterns, for logic, and found none. Minutes stretched. My thoughts drifted to the antiques I was carrying, pieces from old estates, items with histories that clung to them. I shook my head, angry at myself for the thought. Objects were objects. Roads were roads. Fear was making stories where there were none. Ahead, the road dipped and curved. I slowed instinctively. The lights did not. They closed the distance until the glare filled my mirrors, bleaching everything else away. I slammed the brakes, unable to help myself. The lights stopped inches from my rear bumper. Still no sound, still no shape. My breath came fast and shallow. I whispered, "What do you want?" Knowing how ridiculous it sounded, the answer came as a presence rather than a voice. A pressure, a sense of being observed from all sides at once. The silence deepened, and with it came understanding, unwelcome and clear. I was not alone on the road, because the road itself was not empty. It remembered everyone who had crossed it, everyone who had broken down, crashed, vanished in storms like this. I started the engine again and drove, slower now, respectful, as if navigating a crowded room. The lights receded, then vanished entirely. Sound returned in pieces, rain, engine, my own breathing. I didn't stop until I reached town. I never drove that road again. And I never doubt how loud silence can be. I kept going even after my hands started to cramp, after my shoulders burned from tension. Because stopping felt like an invitation. The road signs blurred past, half seen, and I realized I was whispering instructions to myself, narrating every movement as if being witnessed mattered. I talked about the crates in back, naming the pieces I remembered, grounding myself in inventory and weight and value. The headlights returned once, briefly, farther back this time, dimmer, as if reconsidering me. I didn't slow. I didn't speed up. I held my pace steady, heart hammering, telling myself that acknowledgement was enough, that whatever shared the road wanted recognition, not panic. The silence pulsed, easing and tightening like breath, and I matched it, inhaling and exhaling in time. I thought about the man who sold me one of the cabinets earlier that day, how he'd hesitated before letting it go, saying it had watched his family for generations. I'd laughed then. Now the words replayed differently. Roads watched too. They bore weight, carried stories, kept score. Maybe tonight I was just another mark passing through. Gradually, the sense of being followed faded. The mirrors showed only darkness and rain again. Sound returned fully, messy and imperfect and comforting. I pulled over at a lit lobby near town, stepped out, and leaned against the van, breathing hard. Everything felt too bright, too loud, but real. When I reached my destination and unloaded the antiques, I checked the van carefully. No marks, no signs of another vehicle. Just mud and water where I'd driven. I slept poorly for weeks afterward, waking to silence that felt heavy. Even now, when rain overwhelms everything else, I remember that drive and keep moving, knowing some roads prefer you don't linger. I asked around later, careful with my phrasing, and learned that the Moor Road had a reputation among drivers, especially those who traveled alone at night. Breakdowns that resolved themselves. Reports of being followed with nothing there. Old accidents where vehicles were found, but people were not. No official explanations, just shrugs and advice to avoid storms. I didn't tell anyone exactly what I'd seen, only that the road felt wrong that night. Saying more felt disrespectful, like gossiping about something that had allowed me to leave. I sent a note to the client apologizing for the delay, blaming the weather, and they accepted it without question. Years later, I still transport antiques, still drive long routes, but I plan differently now. I stop when I need to. I listen when something feels off, and when rain grows loud enough to drown out the engine, I remember that silence isn't empty. It's crowded, and sometimes the safest thing you can do is pass through quietly and keep going. I never went back to collect proof or confirmation, because proof would have changed nothing. The experience settled into me instead, reshaping how I move through dark places. I respect boundaries I cannot see. I treat solitude as conditional, not guaranteed. That night taught me that being alone is sometimes a courtesy extended to you, not a fact. And that courtesy can be withdrawn without warning, especially on old roads. I accepted that lesson fully, and it has kept me alive, attentive, and humble every mile since, even when nothing else seems wrong at all times. I hit the brakes as soon as I saw him, a lone figure on the shoulder with one arm raised, rain pouring hard enough to blur his outline. I had been driving for hours, enjoying the empty road, and the sight of someone out there cut through my focus. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked where he was headed. He leaned closer so I could hear him and named a town I had passed an hour earlier. I told him to get in. The door swung open wide, rain splashing onto the seat and floor. He climbed in smoothly, thanked me, and closed the door. I noticed it immediately, the wrongness of it. Before my mind caught up, his jacket was dry, not damp, not darkened by water, but completely dry, like it had never been outside. I stared, then looked at my own soaked sleeves, trying to make sense of it. He sat back, relaxed, hands folded, eyes on the road ahead. I laughed nervously and said something about the rain easing up fast. He smiled politely but did not respond. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe some kind of fabric treatment. Maybe I was just tired. Still, I watched him in the corner of my eye as I pulled back onto the highway. The rain hammered the roof again, loud and relentless. Water streamed across the windshield, and every puddle sent spray fanning outward. His clothes stayed the same. No sheen, no dark spots. When I glanced at the floor near his feet, there was no water there either, despite the door having been open. My pulse picked up, a steady thump I could not ignore. I asked his name. He gave me one I did not recognize, common enough, said in a calm voice. I asked how long he had been walking. He shrugged and said, a while. The answer felt deliberately vague. I pressed a little, asking where he started. He looked at me then, eyes steady, and said he could not remember. We drove in silence for several minutes. I focused on keeping the car steady on the familiar curve of the road, but my attention kept drifting back to him. I cracked a joke about bad weather bringing strange luck. He nodded, still smiling faintly. His breath did not fog the window. I noticed that next, and my mouth went dry. I told myself to stop cataloging details, to stop feeding fear. People were strange. Nights played tricks on you. I turned the radio on, filling the space with music, but the normality of it only made his presence feel more out of place. He did not react to the sound at all. When I asked again where he wanted to be dropped off, he pointed ahead, somewhere vague and unmarked. I slowed, scanning the roadside. There was nothing there but flooded grass and darkness. I said I could not stop there safely. He turned toward me, and his smile faded. For the first time, I felt a real edge of warning. He asked me if I believed in coincidence. The question caught me off guard. I said I was not sure. He nodded, as if that answered something important. The rain grew heavier, drumming so loudly it made my head ache. I wanted the ride to end, wanted him out of the car, but the idea of stopping alone with him made my stomach knot. I told him I would take him to the next proper turnoff. He accepted that easily, too easily, and leaned back again. The road stretched on longer than I expected. Signs I knew seemed farther apart. I checked the speedometer, convinced I had slowed without realizing. Everything looked normal, except him. Finally, lights appeared ahead, a small cluster marking a junction. Relief washed through me. I pulled over under the streetlight, rain pouring down in bright sheets. I turned to him and said we had arrived. He thanked me again, opened the door and stepped out. Water splashed everywhere around him, soaking my shoes. He stood there for a moment, looking back at me. His clothes were still dry. Not a drop clung to him. Understanding settled in slowly, heavy and unavoidable. I had picked up someone who did not belong to the rain, or the road, or maybe even the night. He leaned down and said, quietly, that most drivers never stopped. Then he closed the door and walked away. I watched until the light swallowed him. I drove off shaking, and I have never picked up a hitchhiker again. I finished the drive in a kind of daze, gripping the wheel too tightly, checking the mirrors over and over as if expecting him to reappear. Every puddle I hit made me flinch. Every reflection looked like a person standing just out of view. By the time I reached my stop for the night, my jaw ached from clenching it. I did not sleep much. When I closed my eyes, I saw dry fabric in falling rain, saw the way water bent around him like he was not part of it. In the morning, I told myself the fear would fade with daylight. It did not. I drove back along the same highway later that week, curious despite myself, and slowed near the spot where I had picked him up. There was a small wooden cross by the ditch, weathered and leaning. No name, just a date carved into it. I pulled over and stood there for a long time. Rain starting again, lighter this time. I understood then why he had been dry. He had already left the road behind. He only needed someone to notice him once. I went home after that and changed how I travel. I still drive alone sometimes, but I do not stop anymore, not on empty roads in bad weather. I am not proud of that, but I am honest about it. I gave him a ride when he needed one. That has to be enough. Years later, I mentioned the night to a local mechanic while waiting for repairs, choosing my words carefully. He went quiet and told me the highway used to claim walkers during storms, people misjudging distance, disappearing between towns. Bodies were found sometimes not. Drivers talked about giving lifts to people who never should have been there. Most laughed it off, some did not. Hearing that did not scare me more. It settled something. The experience stopped being a question and became a fact I carry. I did not imagine it. I did not cause it. I intersected with it briefly and then moved on. That understanding lets me sleep now, even when rain hits hard and the road stretches empty ahead of me. I am telling you this because it sounds impossible until it happens to you. The world has edges we do not see, moments where rules thin. I was not chosen or cursed. I was just present. That night taught me respect, not fear, and that some kindnesses are one time only, meant to be given and then released without trying to hold them. I keep driving, I keep noticing, and I keep my windows closed, trusting that noticing was enough, and that the road, the rain, and the hitchhiker all accepted that exchange without asking me for anything more afterward. It remains the strangest kindness I ever witnessed or participated in there personally. I was pulling off the service road when the storm finally loosened its grip, my hands stiff from gripping the wheel, my radio hissing with static. I parked beneath a stand of trees, engine ticking, and exhaled hard, telling myself the inspection was finished and uneventful for the long night. I always reviewed dashcam footage after storms, protocol drilled into me from my first season. Mudslides, fallen branches, strange animal behavior. Anything mattered. I powered down, pulled the memory card, and sat there listening to water drip, feeling the familiar calm settle back into my chest despite lingering unease tonight. The file list loaded slowly on my laptop, rows of timestamps marching past. Most were ordinary, boring even. Then I saw one that made my breath hitch, a clip labeled with tomorrow's date, neatly sorted after tonight's recordings, as if time itself had been misfiled by the system somehow alone. I laughed softly, blaming fatigue, but curiosity won. I opened the file. The video showed my own vehicle from behind, parked exactly where I sat now. Headlights off, trees still, nothing moved. The timestamp glowed steady, insisting this was footage not yet lived, and that certainty unsettled me deeply now. I leaned closer, scanning the edges of the frame, noticing details I shouldn't recognize yet. A branch snapped in the audio, sharp and close. My stomach tightened. In the video, something shifted just beyond the reach of the headlights, barely disturbing the darkness, as though waiting for attention silently there. I paused the clip and checked the system clock, then my phone, then the radio log. Everything agreed on the date. I felt foolish and cold at once. When I resumed playback, the shape resolved slightly, tall and still, positioned where the road curved away from my present viewpoint now. My pulse thudded loud enough to hear. The figure did not approach the car. It simply waited, facing the driver's door, patient and certain. I realized the footage had sound beyond rain, a low, rhythmic noise matching my own breathing, exactly recorded long before I noticed anything unusual at all. I closed the laptop, heart racing, and sat in silence. Logic demanded an explanation. Corruption, glitch, mislabeling. I opened it again, determined to prove myself wrong. The file now showed the figure closer, one step nearer the bumper. Unchanged otherwise, as if time advanced without my consent or understanding tonight. I packed up fast, nerves buzzing, and decided to leave. Whatever this was, I would not meet it here. I started the engine and rolled away, glancing back once. Nothing stood there now. The road looked ordinary again, empty and wet beneath tired trees and indifferent sky above me tonight. I drove until the park lights appeared, relief washing through me. I filed the storm report, said nothing about the video. Sleep came poorly. I dreamed of headlights illuminating nothing, of waiting shapes. Morning arrived grey and ordinary, grounding me enough to think clearly about procedures and evidence handling today. At the office, I reviewed the card again, this time with a colleague present. The file was gone. The list ended cleanly at last night's timestamp. I felt heat creep up my neck as I explained, hearing how it sounded aloud even to my own skeptical ears then there now. Protocol required documenting anomalies. I did, carefully, neutrally. Later, alone again, I checked the laptop clock. Tomorrow's date glowed closer than comfort allowed. I drove the same route at dusk, heart steady, determined to reclaim the road through repetition, presence, and refusal to imagine threats beyond reasonable evidence tonight again. I parked where I had before and waited, lights off. Minutes passed, nothing emerged. I breathed, counted, listened. No rhythmic sound, no movement. The road remained empty. Confidence returned slowly, like warmth after cold. I told myself the future is suggestion, not command, especially when fear frames perception alone there. I drove back satisfied, convinced the episode had ended. At home, I downloaded routine files for archiving. One new clip appeared, dated tomorrow again. My throat tightened. I opened it despite myself. It showed my driveway, my car arriving, my porch light off, and something standing beside my door then. I felt anger cut through fear. I refused to be shepherded by a file. I called a friend and asked them to stay on the line. Then I went outside early, before the time shone, and waited where the video claimed something would stand with resolve and measured breathing steady. Nothing arrived. Minutes slid past the predicted moment. The night stayed ordinary. When the hour passed, the tension broke. I laughed shakily and went inside. The next morning, the file was gone. No trace remained anywhere, including backups and logs, according to audits I personally verified later that week myself. I filed a final note and moved on. Time dulled the edge, but not the lesson. Whatever I saw responded to attention, to expectation. It predicted nothing. It reflected intent. By choosing to confront rather than flee, I ended the conversation on my terms without offering continued participation from me. I still review footage carefully, but I do not linger. I trust procedure, colleagues, and my senses equally. The park remains vast and quiet. Storms pass, roads empty. I remind myself the future is not a place waiting for us. It arrives only when we do, and then immediately changes. That night taught me boundaries I hadn't named before. Curiosity opens doors, intention decides which stay open. I tell you this because records matter, but so do choices. I chose presence over panic, daylight over dread, and the story closed itself without claiming anything more from me ever again now. If you ever find a file labeled tomorrow, pause before reacting. Ask what it wants and whether you must answer. Fear feeds loops. Calm ends them. I am not braver than anyone. I simply stayed, looked directly, and refused to run from time when it tested my resolve that night. Afterward, colleagues asked why I seemed steadier. I said storms teach patience. I did not describe the figure or the dates. Some experiences lose power when shared carelessly. This one felt complete, like a knot tied properly. I respected that finality and kept working quietly onward alone afterward, daily still. I learned to watch my reactions closely. Anticipation can manufacture meaning where none exists. Stillness can dissolve it. When storms come now, I finish inspections, review files, and sleep. If tomorrow wants my attention, it will arrive honestly, not hiding inside a mislabeled recording ever again from me there then. Sometimes I consider how easily I could have obeyed the implication, rushed home frightened, fulfilled the image. That thought chills me more than the figure ever did. Futures should not be rehearsed under duress. They should be lived forward, one grounded choice at a time, steadily, always consciously alone enough. I keep the laptop updated, the clocks synced, the logs reviewed. Practicality anchors me. If something impossible appears again, I know what to do. I will verify, confront, and choose action deliberately. Fear may visit, but it does not get to schedule my tomorrow anymore ever again. Here now, please. So that is what happened on the service road, after the storm, before dawn. I saw tomorrow waiting and declined the invitation. The park still stands. I still work there. And when I drive at night, the road stays empty, exactly as it should be always for me now here. I was already late, and the rain was pressing hard against the windshield as I followed the lakeside route, hands tight on the wheel. Documents sliding on the passenger seat. Every kilometer felt heavier, because today I was driving to sign a paper I had avoided for years, one that would finally correct my name. The wipers kept time like a metronome, while my thoughts jumped between relief and fear. I told myself this was just a drive, just ink on a page, nothing more. When the first road sign appeared ahead, glowing through the rain, I leaned forward automatically, expecting directions, distance, reassurance. Instead, it waited silently, as if reading me, reflecting something I had buried and hoped distance alone could erase forever now. The sign did not show arrows or town names. It showed a phrase I had not heard since childhood, the nickname my mother whispered when tucking me in. I felt heat rush to my face and checked the road, convinced exhaustion was playing tricks. The next sign confirmed it, displaying the street where I grew up, letters crisp and undeniable. My chest tightened as memories surfaced uninvited, evenings staring into a mirror wondering why my reflection felt wrong. I slowed, breath shallow, aware that every sign now faced me personally. The road felt narrower, not physically, but emotionally, closing around decisions I thought I had outrun. Rain drummed louder, blurring forward vision, while sharpening everything I had tried to leave behind deliberately for years past. I considered turning back, but the next sign removed that option by showing a date burned into my memory, the day I promised myself I would transition someday. My hands shook so badly I had to loosen my grip. I whispered that this was impossible, yet the road continued calmly. Another sign flickered and displayed a courthouse sketch, identical to the building ahead. I realized then the road was not guiding my car, it was guiding me. Each sign stripped excuses away, replacing distance with confrontation. Fear mixed with relief, because part of me had waited years to be forced forward. The rain felt intentional now, pressing me onward, erasing escape routes and demanding I choose movement over endless hesitation without further delay tonight alone. I tried covering my eyes briefly, a stupid reflex, then laughed shakily at myself. When I looked again, the sign ahead showed my old name crossed out, replaced by the one I used privately. My throat closed. I remembered practicing that name alone, saying it until it sounded real. The road curved, and with it came another sign listing questions I had avoided answering. Was I ready? Was I afraid? Who would I be without hiding? Each word felt heavier than steel. The rain soaked the car, but could not wash away the clarity forming inside me. I sensed the road, remembering every mile I drove, pretending, every compromise, every silence. Now returning them with unsettling precision, as guidance, not punishment or threat to me. The next sign pointed toward the lakeside pull-off, a place I once stopped years earlier after a breakdown, crying alone, promising change. My chest hurt remembering that night. I pulled over now, engine idling, rain slanting hard. Another sign stood there where none should be, showing my own handwriting, words from an unsent letter forgiving myself. I covered my mouth and sobbed, finally understanding the road was not tormenting me. It was reminding me of promises I made when no one else listened. I realized then the documents waiting ahead were not an ending, but a beginning delayed by fear, habit, and misplaced loyalty to past expectations that no longer fit the life I was quietly building alone, despite resistance, regret, and doubt lingering. When I drove on, the signs returned to normal, distances and arrows back in place. My breathing steadied, though my hands still trembled. I followed them without hesitation now, each kilometer lighter. The courthouse appeared ahead, solid and real. I parked, sat for a moment, and thanked the road aloud, feeling foolish but sincere. Inside, the signing was quick, anticlimactic, ink met paper, and nothing dramatic happened. Yet walking back to the car, I felt taller, as if the road had straightened my spine. The rain softened, losing urgency, and I sensed the guidance ending, satisfied, leaving me alone with my choice and its quiet weight settling fully without resistance or regret, for the first time ever within my chest, steady, warm, resolved, and clear. Driving home, no signs changed again, yet the road felt different, familiar but tender. I replayed every moment, trying to explain it logically, but logic felt unnecessary now. The road had not forced me, it had reflected me. That distinction mattered. I slept deeply that night, free of the looping doubts that once gnawed at me. In the morning, I returned to ordinary routines, but something fundamental had shifted. I no longer felt chased by my past. It felt acknowledged, then released. The fear of signing, of visibility, dissolved into relief. And I understood courage sometimes arrives disguised as persistent reminders you cannot ignore, especially when they come from places you trust, like roads, memories, and your own reflection staring back at you. Patiently, honestly, I checked later for news of malfunctioning signs or pranks. There was nothing, no reports, no explanations. That absence reassured me more than proof would have. Some experiences are meant to stay personal. The road never showed me anything again. It did not need to. I had listened. When rain falls now, I still pay attention, not in fear, but respect. Roads carry more than traffic. They carry choices, moments, and sometimes, if you are ready, they remind you who you are. I tell you this because I once believed escape was survival, but survival turned out to be honesty, even when honesty demanded irreversible forward movement through fear, rain, memory, and a road that refused to forget me until I finally stopped running inside. The documents sit filed now, unremarkable, yet everything changed because of them. I am not haunted by that drive. I am grateful. The road did not threaten me or promise salvation. It simply remembered me accurately. That accuracy was terrifying and necessary. I share this with you not as a warning, but reassurance. If the world reflects you too clearly, it is not always an attack. Sometimes it is an invitation to become whole, to stop dividing yourself for comfort. I spent years believing fragmentation was protection, but unity arrived the moment I accepted who I was without negotiating my existence. The road helped me see that truth clearly without judgment, pressure, or violence, just reflection, memory, timing, and rain guiding me homeward again, intact. So when I drive that road now, I smile quietly and keep my eyes open. Nothing appears anymore. Nothing needs to. The road remembers me, and I remember myself. That balance is enough. I signed the document. I changed my life. And the rain, relentless that night, washed away only the doubt, leaving the truth intact, solid, and mine. That is the whole story, strange but real, and it ended exactly where it needed to, with me choosing myself and continuing forward. I no longer fear roads that reflect memory, because reflection led me to peace rather than loss or regret. The road remembered me once, and that remembrance finally set me free completely, without needing to repeat the lesson ever again afterward for life.